Check, check, check. We were talking earlier about what if this thing took off and became so popular that, oops. I wanted to start my clock here just so Elle can't lie later and say I'm over time. Anyway, we're talking like, what if the screaming goat thing became so popular that it like replaced clapping and so on in the future? That'd be awesome. Classic, 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 classic. So anyway, is atheism compatible with logic, science, and reality? Short answer, no. Notice you don't see AP in here. Oh, look at him hiding behind the glass. Yeah, run. Run. Covers his ears and runs. Yeah, so anyway, I wanted to clarify here that when I talk about atheism, because atheism has taken on all kinds of meanings as people change the definition. Well, one, people can mean something different by the term atheism, and some people, mainly the new atheists, tried to make it immune to criticism by saying it just refers to a lack of belief. There's something really weird about defining a position as a lack of belief in something, because following that, I mean, like, is this table an atheist? This table lacks belief in God. Is that chair you're sitting on? Is that an atheist you're sitting on right there? It lacks belief in God. The floor, is that an atheist? Anyway, there's something weird about that. And it's interesting. Back in the 1980s, Madeleine Murray O'Hair. Some of you are way too young to remember her, but she was the head of American Atheists back then. She was like, back then, atheists tended not to be mean or aggressive. It was like, oh, if you Christians need that, that's fine for you. I don't care. What do I care? But American Atheists was like more aggressive. They were like the new atheists before the new atheists. Anyway, she described agnostics as atheists without the guts to say it. And then you get to the new atheists, and they define atheism in a way that's pretty similar to just agnosticism, right? And so sadly, she was killed by her people from her own foundation. Some of you laughed, you sick, you sick monsters. Anyway, she was murdered by people who worked for her. But if she were around today and she saw atheists, it's just lack of belief. I think she would be, she'd be rolling. I'll say it. She would be rolling over in her grave right now if she saw what had happened to atheism. Anyway, so atheism, of course, just means, not theism. And so technically, a person who doesn't believe in God or gods qualifies as an atheist, even if that person happened to believe in ghosts and spirits and so on. If you don't believe in God, you would technically be an atheist. But the strong version of atheism, which is what most atheists thought back in the day, and what most atheists in the West actually think today, is basically naturalism, right? The natural world is all that exists, and there's nothing apart from the natural world. So then there's no God, no gods, no angels, no demons, no spirits, and so on. So I'll bring it back to a more flexible version of atheism in the end, but we're going to talk about naturalism. The strong version of atheism that is naturalism, just the natural world. The natural world is all that exists. We're going to focus on that, and then we'll bring it around later on. So I'm focusing on the strong version of atheism. Is that compatible with logic, science, and reality? And so naturalism, again, is roughly the claim that the natural world is what exists or what is real. It would be contrasted with supernaturalism in all its forms. What? There's Silver Palisade out there that is going off over and over again. Why are you telling me this? Someone is trying to rob your car, ladies and gentlemen. All right, guys, now I'm going to have to speak twice as fast for the rest of this presentation. So supernaturalism would be the view that something supernatural exists, and then you have various forms. If you're a theist Christian, you are a supernaturalist of one sort. And supernaturalism would usually include the idea not just that there are supernatural entities, but also that they interact with the world somehow. So these are very different worldviews, and sometimes we want to show other people or convince other people that our worldview is the correct one. One problem that arose with the so-called new atheism is that the leaders of the movement started training people with a methodology not designed to get people to the truth. They trained them just to play skeptic, which is very, very easy to do. Playing skeptic is very easy. If you don't want to believe in something, almost anything that anyone could bring up that you don't want to believe in, you could dial your skepticism level up enough so that nothing would ever qualify as evidence. And there are lots of examples of this. One that I like, just because it was nice to see someone being so honest, was Richard Dawkins in a discussion with Peter Boghossian, when Dawkins was asked something along the lines of, if God did exist and he wanted to show you that he existed, what evidence could God give you that he existed? And Dawkins said that when he was younger, he would have said, well, if I hear some booming voice saying, Richard Dawkins, believe in me, or something like that, that would have done it. He says, but since then, I've come to realize that if that happened, I would just think I'm hallucinating. And so they go back and forth on what could actually even qualify as evidence in his mind. And they got to the point where they're saying, what if a message was written in the stars, something like, Richard Dawkins, believe in me? And they agreed that in order to believe that God did it, you'd have to rule out the idea that extremely powerful alien tricksters were doing it to make Richard try to believe in God. And so since you can't rule that out, Dawkins concluded that nothing could ever convince him. Now think about that. That's Richard Dawkins saying that even if God did exist, there's nothing that could even possibly convince him that God exists. God could appear right here and be blasting lightning bolts, and you could always say, well, maybe it's powerful alien tricksters trying to trick me. So what happened with the new atheists is they didn't come up with some great methodology designed to get them to the truth. They constructed a position that is immune to evidence that goes against their position. And there are other positions that can do that. Metaphysical solipsism is a view that does that. A metaphysical solipsist is someone who believes that he's the only thing that exists, and that the world around him is just something he creates in his mind to entertain himself for all eternity. If you were to encounter an actual metaphysical solipsist, what evidence could you give that person to convince him that something outside of him exists? The answer is nothing, because you'd be sitting there talking to him, he thinks you're a figment of his imagination. There's no evidence you could possibly give him. So naturalism is more like an expanded version of that. A metaphysical solipsist is, I'm the only thing that exists, and a metaphysical naturalist is, the physical world is all that exists. And so you've got our good friend Richard Dawkins, who ironically has spent most of his career challenging theists to give him evidence for God, and yet when it comes right down to it, he acknowledges there's no evidence you could put. Isn't that weird? You develop a methodology that's immune to evidence, and then you go around, where's your evidence? Give me your evidence. I'm going to reject it no matter what it is, even if it's airtight, 100% certain, I'm still going to reject it, but come on, give me your evidence. I have to point out this, again, this method could be used to reject absolutely anything. I could use this method to reject the existence of any atheist. I could issue a challenge to every atheist in the world. And I do this online when you get the angry atheist and like, prove to me that God exists. I instantly respond, first, prove to me that you exist. And then I start playing skeptic. But you can issue this challenge. All atheists, I challenge all the mighty atheist intellects of the universe. Prove to me that you, the atheist, exist. Prove to me that one atheist actually exists, and I'll become an atheist. But I'm going to play skeptic the entire time. And I'm going to use the methods of Richard Dawkins to respond to you. And so when you say, oh, well, I obviously exist because I'm talking. Well, how do I know that I'm not imagining it? How do I know I'm not hallucinating? How do I know that powerful alien tricksters aren't trying to trick me? I can't rule out powerful alien tricksters tricking me right now, right? Can't rule that out. That's according to them. So what evidence could you give me that I could not attribute to powerful alien tricksters? Answer is nothing. You can't give me any evidence. And so I'll just say this. If you have a methodology that you think is giving you the truth about God, but it would rule out you being able to prove your own existence, I'd say you got a problem. I'd say you need a new methodology. But let's focus on naturalism. One of the most catastrophically self-undermining positions in history. I don't say that lightly. This is one of the most catastrophically self-undermining positions in history. So when I say that something is catastrophically self-undermining, I mean, if you take it serious, if you take the claim seriously, you can't take it seriously, according to the claim itself. So if I were to say there is no truth, you guys should know by now, what would be your response? Is that true? Right? People have caught on. This is a catastrophically self-undermining statement. Some claims can be somewhat self-undermining, like if you took them seriously, you'd have some reasons to doubt them. Others are catastrophically self-undermining in that if you take it seriously, you can't take it seriously. It just destroys itself. So you have simple ones like this, then you have some that you have to flesh out a little bit, but for a more relevant version, in Descartes, if you've heard of René Descartes, the philosopher, he's considered the father of modern philosophy. But in his meditations on first philosophy, Descartes imagines what it would be like if an all-powerful demon were constantly deceiving him. So to be clear, he doesn't believe that an all-powerful demon is constantly trying to deceive him. He does it as a thought experiment in order to see if there's anything he couldn't possibly be wrong about. Because even if an omnipotent deceiver were deceiving you at every moment, if there's something that even an omnipotent deceiver could not trick you about, then that would be something you can be absolutely certain about. And so he goes through various things and eventually concludes that there is something that an omnipotent deceiver could not trick him about, and that's his own existence. Not your existence, because a powerful demon like that could be tricking me about your existence, but his own existence, he thinks, even an omnipotent deceiver could not trick him about. Why? Well, because if an omnipotent deceiver is tricking me, then I obviously exist. If an omnipotent deceiver is tricking me into thinking various things, then obviously, I'm still something, so I still exist. So that's something he views as absolutely certain. He could not possibly be wrong as long as he is thinking. So this is the famous "I think, therefore I am." As long as he's thinking, he is something that thinks. And then he goes through the rest of the meditations, coming up with other things that he couldn't possibly be wrong about. Again, Descartes did not believe in an omnipotent deceiver. But suppose you met someone who did believe that. Suppose you met someone who believes that he's being deceived every moment of every day by an omnipotent demon. That person's worldview should raise an obvious question. Namely, if you really believe that you're constantly being deceived by an omnipotent demon, how can you trust your beliefs enough to trust your belief that you're constantly being deceived by an omnipotent deceiver? If you can't trust your beliefs at all because you think you're being constantly deceived, how could you believe this hypothesis? What, the demon tricked you about absolutely everything except this one belief in him? Something really weird about that. In other words, if you took the hypothesis seriously, the omnipotent deceiver hypothesis seriously, you couldn't take it seriously. You couldn't trust your cognitive faculties, your thought processes enough. If you thought you were being constantly deceived, you couldn't trust it enough to trust a hypothesis like this. So if you take the omnipotent deceiver hypothesis seriously, you can't take it seriously. So this is what I mean by a catastrophically self-undermining hypothesis. But there's another catastrophically self-undermining hypothesis that's actually quite similar to this. And it's called naturalism. If you take naturalism seriously, I say you can't take it seriously because you can't treat the cognitive abilities that produce the belief in naturalism, you can't produce those thought processes as reliable when you're dealing with a hypothesis like naturalism. Naturalism is a hypothesis about all of reality, everything that is real. If naturalism were true, and you received your cognitive faculties, so reason, perception, memory, and so on, if that hypothesis were true, and you received your cognitive faculties from the naturalistic processes that are available, they're the only things that are available on naturalism, then you can't trust your cognitive faculties when you're dealing with a topic like naturalism. They weren't made for something like that. In other words, whatever produced your brain, it makes it unreliable when dealing with hypotheses like this. So let me explain why. Human beings have the ability to reason. We're using it right now. And we tend to trust our reasoning ability. We wouldn't have discussions like this if we didn't trust our reasoning ability. If we thought that our cognitive faculties were fundamentally unreliable, we just wouldn't try things like this. But naturalists have a problem here because they can only explain things by appealing to natural objects, natural events, natural causes. Now think about this for a moment. You have beliefs. Ultimately, according to naturalism, your beliefs must be the result of physical processes in your brain. Now, what's going on in here? Particles in motion, chemical reactions, neurons firing. It's all physical. Physical particles governed by laws of nature, not by commitment to truth or something like that. So, what really seems like careful reasoning to you is, in reality, straightforward, mechanical, mindless cause and effect. Particles in motion being controlled by laws of nature. It's a fancy array of falling dominoes. In other words, according to something like naturalism, whatever thought you're having right now, it was determined all along, just by particles in motion, going back to way before you were ever born. It's all just cause and effect. Illusions aside then, you arrive at your beliefs via a process that has absolutely nothing to do with whether those beliefs are true or false. Chemicals couldn't conceivably care less what your beliefs are. If naturalism is true, and you believe in naturalism right now, so if naturalism is true and you believe in naturalism, you are causally determined by processes that go back way before you to believe in naturalism. It's particles and laws of nature. If naturalism is true and you believe in supernaturalism, you believe in God or something, you were causally determined by non-rational particles mindlessly obeying non-rational laws of nature, by a process set in motion long before you were born. You were determined to believe what you believe right now. So if naturalism is true, then whether you're a naturalist or a supernaturalist or whatever, that's what you were determined to believe. If you change your belief at some point, you were already determined by particles in motion to believe that sort of thing. The particles the laws of nature, the particles and the laws of nature that causally determined what you believe right now couldn't conceivably care less what you believe, couldn't conceivably care less whether your beliefs are true or false. A false belief is every bit as causally determined as a true belief. So if naturalism is true, what sense does it make to trust our reasoning ability or our beliefs or even our belief in naturalism? You were programmed to believe in it if you believe in it. So if naturalism is true, what sense does it make to trust our reasoning ability, our beliefs? None whatsoever. But it gets worse. It gets way worse than that. Here's a quote from Charles Darwin. Darwin is responding to William Graham, whose book was a defense of design in nature. Darwin writes to Graham, reviewing his book, says, "You have expressed my inward conviction, though far more vividly and clearly than I could have done, that the universe is not the result of chance. But then with me, interesting, he admits that he doesn't believe the universe is, follow the reasoning here. This is interesting. He says, hey, what you're saying about the universe not being the result of chance, that's the way, that's my conviction. But watch what he says. But then with me, the horrid doubt always arises whether the convictions of man's mind, which has been developed from the mind of the lower animals, are of any value, no value, are of any value or at all trustworthy. Would anyone trust in the convictions of a monkey's mind if there are any convictions in such a mind? So think about what he's saying. It's simple thought. He's saying, yes, I look around at the universe too, and it doesn't seem like chance. It seems like design. Everything you're saying makes perfect sense. It really looks designed. But I have this additional belief about how I got my ability to reason, and I can't trust it with stuff like that. It's not made for things like that. And so how can I trust it? If a monkey told you what he believes about the universe, would you agree with him? So this is interesting. He's saying, yeah, that's the way it seems, but I can't trust my own reasoning ability on these kinds of issues. So Darwin says that he shares Graham's conviction that the universe is not the result of chance, but he can't trust his own convictions because his mind has been developed from the mind of the lower animals. Someone could argue that reliable cognitive faculties would help organisms survive and reproduce and would therefore be selected in the struggle for survival. But this response doesn't actually work if you know how the whole project of evolution works. So first, a couple problems here. First, even false beliefs can help organisms survive and reproduce. If you refuse to eat certain berries because you believe they're poisonous, and I don't eat the same berries because I believe they've been cursed by a powerful wizard, we both don't eat the berries and we both survive. Natural selection doesn't care why you don't eat the berries. It just affects you if you don't eat the berries. So guess, true belief, false belief. They both work there. A false belief can often help you survive just as well as a true belief. Sometimes could even help you more. For purposes of selection, false beliefs can sometimes be more effective than true beliefs. So suppose you're a guy and you've got the hots for some lady who's completely out of your league. And you call up the psychic hotline or something. And the psychic on the phone says, hey, look at the stars. This is just the right time for love. And so you go up to the lady, hey, what's your name, girl? What's your sign, right? Because of the psychic hotline convinced you to do that. Well, she might actually be impressed that you had the courage to approach her, and you guys might end up having 10 kids. So your false belief might have actually helped you, in the struggle for survival and reproduction. That's a selection advantage. So false beliefs work. Third, the kinds of beliefs that help us survive and reproduce, the ones that actually are beneficial in the struggle for survival, they're usually grounded in simple observation and experience. So my cave mate, Fag, died eating those berries, so I won't eat them. That's it. That's all you need. Guess what? Even the lower mammals can do that, right? This is how mice become, I call it trap smart. They don't go in the trap anymore. They've seen their buddies die on anything that looks like that or smells like that. They don't go near it. Guess what? That works. That's why that mouse survived. He became trap smart. So our cognitive faculties are more developed than those of a mouse, but how much so? How much so? Enough to discover the truths of metaphysics of the universe and so on? Like enough to conclude in a powerful hypothesis like metaphysical naturalism? So in other words, the features that actually help you survive and reproduce are things like finding food, using a spear against an enemy, doing something to attract a mate. Naturalism combined with natural selection gives you no basis for trusting your reasoning ability when it comes to theology or epistemology or ethics or metaphysics. You're not made for those. That's not what your abilities were selected for. As the philosopher Patricia Churchland points out, given a naturalistic interpretation of evolutionary theory, she says truth takes the hindmost in the struggle for survival. So the philosopher Patricia Churchland writes, looked at from an evolutionary point of view, the principal function of nervous systems is to enable the organism to move appropriately. Not just walking around, but getting your position in the right to food, to eat and mate and so on. Boiled down to essentials, a nervous system enables the organism to succeed in the 4 Fs: feeding, fleeing, fighting, and reproducing. Sorry, I had to say that in church, but that's a quote. Okay, I'm reading. The principal chore of nervous systems is to get the body parts where they should be in order that the organism may survive. Insofar as representations serve that function, representations are a good thing. Getting things right in space and time, therefore, is a crucially important factor for nervous systems, and there is often considerable evolutionary pressure deriving from considerations of speed. Improvements in sensory motor control confer an evolutionary advantage. A fancier style of representing is like representing the world in your head. A fancier style of representing is advantageous so long as it is geared to the organism's way of life and enhances the organism's chances of survival. Truth, whatever that is, definitely takes the hindmost. So if human reasoning ability was selected simply because it helped members of our species get the body parts in the right position where they need to be, how can we have any confidence in the central claim of naturalism? As David Hume would say, we must be far removed from the smallest tendency to skepticism not to be apprehensive that we have here got quite beyond the reach of our faculties. In other words, if you take naturalism seriously as a hypothesis, there's only one way that you arrived at your cognitive faculties. And the processes that selected those cognitive faculties to help you survive and reproduce. Truth takes the hindmost. Truth takes the hindmost. If you have false beliefs that help you survive and reproduce, natural selection says, yeah, good there. All right. So how do you then trust what your reasoning produces as far as beliefs about ultimate reality? Not made for that. And therefore, you can't trust it. And naturalism is catastrophically self-undermining. So that's atheism in the strong sense. If you take it seriously, you just can't take it seriously because you can't take your own thought processes seriously. And if I were an atheist in this sense, and you're a theist, I couldn't take your thought processes seriously about ultimate reality or mine. And therefore, if you took it seriously, you just have to say, I don't know what to believe. And you'd be like AP there. You go from being an atheist to an agnostic. Power move, bud. All right, so 2 minutes left. Is atheism compatible with logic, science, and reality? We focused on the strong version of atheism, but something similar would apply to other versions of atheism. If you don't believe that you were created to have reliable cognitive faculties, you don't believe that you were created in the image of God to have reliable cognitive faculties, you can't really trust them, because when you start trying to figure out other ways that you arrived at your cognitive faculties, you end up with the same problems we've kind of gone through. So logic, what is that? Like, what is logic? Right? It's like these rules of correct thinking and so on. What sense would that make from a naturalistic perspective? Science. All of the pioneers, 100%, all the pioneers of the scientific revolution were Christians of one sort or another. There were Catholics, Protestants, you got a couple heretics in there. They all believed in God and the Bible. And they actually connected this to their quest to understand the universe. So just to be clear, other groups and cultures and so on had scientific developments, technology and so on, mathematics. You didn't end up with anything like a revolution until the scientific revolution. And they explained why they concluded that. They explained their project. They believed that the universe is created by a kind of cosmic architect, a cosmic mathematician putting all this together. So one, the universe is intelligible. It can be understood because it's created by a rational agent. 2, they believe that they are the kinds of things, that human beings are the kinds of things that can go out and figure out the laws of nature, because they believe they've been created in the image of the one who created it. And so this is actually the scientific hypothesis of all scientific hypotheses ever. It was one massive scientific hypothesis. If we're right about our belief about the creator of the universe, and we're right about what we are, being created in his image, then when we go out there, we're going to be able to figure out the mathematical equations governing the universe. And they did. In other words, no scientific hypothesis in history has more confirmation than that original hypothesis. Imagine if you were an atheist. Would you think if you didn't know, if Christians hadn't figured it out for you, would you have any reason to think that the universe is going to have these neat little mathematical equations everywhere? No. Why would you think that? Would you think that you're the sort of thing that can go out and understand these things and figure these things out? You can figure out the laws of the universe. Well, if you're just, a couple steps up from your ape ancestors, why would you think that you're the sort of thing that can do that? Never would have gotten off the ground. And of course, reality, again, if you can't trust your cognitive faculties, if they weren't designed to get you to the truth about reality, you're pretty much doomed from the start. So, AP, you can disguise yourself all you want back there. But I saw what t-shirt you were wearing earlier, so I know that's you. You've been humiliated yet again. All right, we probably have time for like 1 or 2 questions real quick. Yep. Oh, they might want you on the mic because they are live. So
there's an apologist at our church, and I think his.
Oh, what at your church?
Huh?
A what?
An apologist.
Oh, okay.
And so.
Good.
Yep.
Just one?
Okay. I mean,
being an apologist is a command in 1 Peter 3:15. Not everyone has to be like full time or make it their whole lives, but we're all commanded.
The rest of them got defeated by the Dawa gang.
Okay.
So,
Oh,
the rest of them were out.
poor guys. Don't worry. Me and AP will show up. We'll regulate for you.
So he practices. I think it's called. I could be wrong on this. Presuppositional apologetics, where he says he never tries to convince someone about the existence of God. Because he says Romans 1 teaches that they know.
They already know.
Yeah. So I just wanted to get your opinion and if you're working from that framework too.
No, when people ask me, I mean, you're full. Are you full presup, Anthony? Yeah. Yeah, I consider myself semi-presup. So a lot of presup guys, they treat it as like this magic bullet, like, oh, well, what is logic? What is this? What is that? What is that? It makes no sense on your view and stuff. And they think that kind of whatever position you have, you can just go through what's required for your thoughts and so on, that this ultimately breaks down. Any position apart from the true Christian position ultimately breaks down. It cannot account for your experience of reality at all. And I agree with some of it. I don't treat it as like this magic bullet. I kind of take elements of it, but I use them in working together with other classic arguments. In other words, like the short version of like how I would think is just think about what's necessary for us to be doing what we're doing right now. We're having a discussion, I'm talking, you're hearing, and so on. Just having a discussion like this, doing what we're doing right now, what are the various things that are required? One, we need a universe. So guess what? That's a basis of like a cosmological argument. Not just any universe, we have a universe that came into existence. It hasn't existed forever. So it came into existence. So then you end up with like the Kalam version of the cosmological argument that anything that begins to exist must have a cause. When you start trying to figure out what that cause is like, ends up sounding a lot like God. So we need a universe to be doing what we're doing right now. Can't just be any sort of universe, has to be one finely tuned for life. If it weren't finely tuned for life, we wouldn't be here right now. So it has to be finely tuned so that beings like us can exist. But you can have a really nice doghouse. You still need the dog, right? You can have it. So it's not just that we have this universe that can support life. You actually need the life. So then you need to get life shockingly complex, right? When people concluded that life can happen on its own, they thought of cells as like little blobs of protoplasm. They're very simple. And then they examine them later and find out they're like little cities in there. They're like little cities, so massively complex. But they'd already adopted the position that it can happen on its own, and so we'll pretend we haven't learned all this stuff, right? So you need life, but then it's not any sort of life that can be doing this. I mean, amoebas aren't doing this right now. So you need like human consciousness to be doing this. So you need life and our kind of consciousness. And then you, of course, need human reasoning ability, and you need laws of logic and so on. If we're examining arguments, you need all of these things. And I would say, and you need all the things that the presuppositionalists are pointing to for our ordinary experience. So I just kind of use it in connect. You need stuff, you need all this stuff. And I would say that I would agree with them in the sense that if you have the wrong worldview, this stuff isn't going to make sense. You could have the wrong worldview and make, like Islam could have the wrong worldview about some of the things, but be right about the universe being created or something like that. But it's eventually going to break down. So yeah, I kind of use it like that. I just use it in a bunch of things that they only make sense on one position. But yeah, I don't just, I don't take the little collection of points that they make and treat it as like the silver bullet.
So you would say it's not fruitless to try to convince someone of the existence of God. That's because don't they think that that's a fruitless endeavor? The precept guy, they'll use arguments and so on, but they believe that deep down you already know it, and so they're trying to show that you're actually in rebellion, and that you don't take your own worldview seriously, because and you could use that. If I was going through this presentation right now just on the point about naturalism, and I said, if you took this seriously, you would not be taking anything serious, any of your beliefs seriously. Apart from, just basic survival and reproduction stuff, you would not be taking your theory about the universe seriously. So the fact that you do take it seriously shows you don't really believe what your own worldview says. But I would use that in connection with arguments for the existence of God. And you can use arguments for the existence of God for the same purpose. You could be trying to show them that their view doesn't make sense of the world. So yeah, I just basically don't like to rule out approaches. I'll just, it's like mixed martial arts. Hey, I'll take the kicks of Muay Thai, and I'll take the boxing of the boxer, and I'll take the jujitsu of the jujitsu guy, and roll it up all into one kind of thing. So yeah.